One of the craziest stories of 2024 so far has been Starbucks. At one point in the last 5 years, it was selling for $130, and then it plummeted all the way down to $70 start of this year. Once Brian Nickell took over, the stock jumped all the way to $90. And even today, there is an immense amount of interest whether they should invest in this company or skip. Is Starbucks a good long-term investor? So we're going to take into account analyst projections, and then we're going to do a second evaluation on what could be its evaluation if Brian Nickell is able to repeat the success he had with Chipotle. Before I get started, like and subscribe. That really helps the channel grow. And if you want to support me any further, you can always check out my Patreon. There, I put up these videos about a week early before they release on YouTube. If you take a look at its revenue, it had exponential growth at the start of 2020, and then it plateaued around Q1 of 2023. It plateaued completely. This ultimately wouldn't have been a big deal, but it was priced to perfection. At one point, it was selling for a 50 PE. So when it couldn't sustain that level of growth, not only corrected itself, but also punished it severely. To illustrate this point, I want to show you guys the PE that it was selling at around its absolute peak, 119. Once its revenue wasn't growing as fast, it still had a massive premium at 42. But once its growth completely plateaued right around this area, right here around the 2022, 2023 area, it plummeted to 29, 22, 20. This was the biggest severe overreaction I've pretty much seen of any company in late memory. So it had a massive correction at 20 PE for a company this well established. It's pretty low. But we really want to know what will be Starbucks' future projected revenue growth. For that, first, we need to realize, is the coffee sector itself expected to grow in the next 5 years? So according to the Gemini model that is powering Google, it's saying yes. But when you start taking a look at some of the forecasts underneath it, you really get an idea of what the percentages could be for the next few years. 3% is one of the analysts. Another says 1 to 2%. Another analyst says a 3.6% by 2020. So the average projected growth of the coffee industry over the next 5 years, I would say, is about 3%. Now we need to take a look at what is Starbucks expected to grow annually over the next 5 years. So according to the Google AI model, it's saying 7.3, but we're going to take an extra look at some of the articles. Some say 11.5, others are saying 3.2 loss. Some are saying 6% decline. Some say they're going to have a 9% growth over the next 3 years, which is about 3%, which is the overall coffee sector growth. Kind of an idea what analysts feel like Starbucks can grow over the next 5 years. Now we're going to take a look at the number of outstanding shares. One of the things that I found very disappointing is even though stock price is heavily being punished, as of late, they are not taking advantage of it. Look at right here, it's below 2% stock buyback, but they had an aggressive stock buyback in this area when the stock was selling at an insane premium. So I'm not liking this strategy. I'm not sure what their thought process is. They should increase number of stock buybacks here, and they should have done little to none over here when the stock was extremely overvalued. But looking at the chart, they did manage to decrease the number of outstanding shares by 7% in the last 5 years. 5 years ago, it had 1.2 billion shares to today having 1.13 billion. Its profit margin was also a bit disappointing for me. I mean, a company that sells you $5 cups, its profit margin right now it's only 10%, and at its absolute peak in the last 5 years, it was at 14%. I would have expected this thing to have 20, 30, or even 40% margin of profit, but 10%, I'll be honest, I was a bit disappointed at this. Now that we've done our research on Starbucks fundamentals, let's go plug in the numbers and see what will be Starbucks stock price in the next 5 years. So I'm gonna go with a compound growth rate of 7%. Even though the entire industry is expected to grow by 3%, and the analyst's expectation for revenue are pretty low, I think Starbucks has immense power for pricing, and added that with the general thesis of the industry growing by average of 3%, I think it's not that unreasonable to expect a 7% compound growth in revenue over the next 5 years. That would give us a total growth of 42% over the next 5 years. Next, I feel like it can decrease its number of outstanding shares at the same rate it's done in the last 5 years. I believe it'll have a lot more capital, and I think there's going to be opportunities where the stock becomes undervalued again, increase their number of stock buybacks. So we'll say that it will reduce its overall number of outstanding share by another 8% in the next 5 years. 28 PE is very reasonable. Honestly, I think this company could sustain this PE even though we're headed into a very saturated and a very, very, very competitive market. So for margin of profit, I'm going with 11% because that's been the historical average for this company. It's never done 20 ever. The most they ever did was 15%. So I'm not expecting them to jump up again at 15. So I'm keeping this at 11. Currently it's at 10.4. I'm keeping it at 11. So when we plug in all those numbers, you get a stock price of $151, which is just 18% better than if you invest that same money into the S&P 500. Now, is that a risk worth taking? No, not even close. If you wanted to get a 2x return, you would have to bought this stock at $75. And let me tell you, you could have actually bought this stock at $75 before Brian Nickell took over as the CEO. On May 3rd, it was selling for $73. The fact that he took over as CEO made the stock, in my opinion, a bad value to buy. Now, all of this was based off of analyst projections and a little bit of my own thesis rubbed into the stock. Stock with this model is not a buy, but a lot of people are extremely bullish because of Brian Nickell, and they believe he can repeat the success he had with Chipotle. So we're going to run that. So when Brian Nickell was at Chipotle, he was able to increase their revenue 15% every year for the last 5 years. We're going to plug in the same numbers into Starbucks, and we'll get a compound return over the next 5 years of 101%. Next, we're going to go to number of shares decrease. Now, when he was at Chipotle, he was able to increase the number of outstanding shares by 6%. We're going to plug in the same numbers into Starbucks, and he was able to maintain a 40-28 PE throughout the entire tenure when he was at Chipotle. So we'll give it the same PE for Starbucks, and he was able to have a profit margin of 15%. This obviously is 4% more than what currently Starbucks has. So we're going to give it a 15% margin of profit. With all the numbers calculated, if Brian Nickell is able to repeat the success of Chipotle, Starbucks could be worth well over $280. Now, here's my honest opinion on Chipotle. I won't invest in it. Even if you bring it down to $70, I won't invest in it. Biggest reason being it lost its customers. It lost all those customers that it spent years and years of marketing to. It lost them in over 2 years because of the geopolitics of the situation. Now it's going to have to spend tremendous amount of money on marketing to gain new customers. Those old customers, when they tried local coffee shops, they actually liked their coffee. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't like the 2000 when Starbucks came in with these premium coffee beans. Pretty much everybody has the same beans and the same supplier. So now people that have local, they're not going to come back to Starbucks. So I see Starbucks having massive headwinds in that area. And these projections that the analysts are projecting and some of my own stuff, I think this only has about a 30% chance of actually playing out. So you have a 70% chance of a decline. Personal opinion, not a good investment. Too many unknown variables. Anyways, I hope you guys liked the video. I hope this was informative. Comment below and let me know, where do you guys fall on? Do you think Brian Nickell can pull out the same success he had with Chipotle? Or do you think the analysts are right? Whatever it is, comment below and let me know. And again, please like and subscribe. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.